Welcome to The Being Leader. I'm Annabelle Graham. Today I'm in dialogue with Sarah Sienkiewicz, who is a qualified coach and an emotional freedom technique practitioner at Clearwater Coach. Sarah supports frazzled and stressed out professionals who are feeling anxious, facing burnout, or desiring a lifestyle change. And she works with individuals and employees who may be feeling constantly stressed, overwhelmed, unproductive, unmotivated, and unfulfilled in their career and lives. Sarah enables them to feel calmer, more focused, confident, and more connected with their inner wisdom and truth. Going beyond simply managing stress, Sarah offers a mind, body, and energetic way for clients to make deeper changes and develop long-lasting resilience. Clients are invited to create their ideal vision for their life and achieve it by consistently taking focused action towards it. Sarah, welcome to The Being Leader.
Thank you for having me.
So in the last few episodes, we've been talking about varying aspects of being as leaders and professionals. You know, really starting the conversations to get people to reflect about how they can step back, find more balance in their lives, and notice what's going on for them physically and emotionally, as well as cognitively, and really become more tuned into themselves and be more self-aware. So I'd be really interested to hear from you, give me a little bit of an understanding about your background and what you do and how that works with your clients and your business.
Yeah, so I would probably say I'm a bit of both, a bit of a being leader and a doing leader. And it's been interesting listening to the podcast and kind of thinking about those things and asking myself, well, which style do I have? So I really work on that big picture stuff, creating the ideal vision. Who do you want to be, what your values are, but then bringing that into action. So then, well, how does that affect what you do? So I will work with individuals or business owners. And often I find that there's a lot of that distraction of the noise and the chaos of life or things in the background that are affecting productivity. So it's creating that space really to unpick all of that noise and all of those distractions, and we get stuck on a hamster wheel, don't we, of like, this is just what I do and this is how life is. But that taking that step back and saying, well, how would I like it to be and what do I need to do to move more towards that?
Yeah, how did you get into this whole coaching thing in the first place, and what drew you to the different tools and techniques that you work with?
So it goes back quite a long way. I'm an avid reader, total bookworm. And I remember, probably at the age of about 19, getting a book called Be Your Own Life Coach. And that was my first introduction to coaching. So before that, I'd started learning about psychology. I started at A-level. I didn't quite finish. I moved to London, but I was still reading lots of spiritual development books, personal development books. And I realised at that point that I loved coaching, that it's looking forward. It's about taking action and the things that you want to bring into your life. But at the time I was working my corporate career. So I started out as the post girl. And because I love networking, I met lots of people and I was always, on the social teams and the sports teams and bringing everyone together and knew everyone. And I loved that side of it. And, over the years developed my career and became, facilities supervisor and HR coordinator, marketing, worked in all different areas of the business. I got a really good understanding, but bringing that, the processes, the procedures, making things efficient, love systems, love a spreadsheet. And then I became, I got married, became a mum and did all that. And then I decided that I really wanted to do the coaching. I trained as a coach, but I also had all this system stuff that I wanted to do. So creating the blend of being able to bring all of that mindset, spiritual development coaching, with the practical day-to-day running side of it and blending them both.
Absolutely. And listening to you, I'm sort of reflecting on my journey, because obviously I worked in one area, I worked in retail, but I equally went, I think, around every department at some point in my career. The only one I've not worked in is finance. And not that's because, not that I don't love them. I equally, like you, love a spreadsheet. But that breadth can be really, really useful when you're working with people. Though,
Yeah.
I find sometimes you do get that little look of, is there no way you've not worked? But for me personally, it's an absolute jack of all trades, definitely master of none. So I said in your introduction, you were an emotional freedom technique practitioner. And I'm conscious some people will go, I have no clue what that is. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I first heard of it. My friend had done a course and introduced it to me in the kitchen. And she started tapping on her head and her face, and she was saying, this is amazing, you've got to hear about this, you've got to try it. And I just initially just wrote it off because I thought, okay, that looks a bit strange, and kind of dismissed it, really, if I'm honest. But I've always loved energy work. I've always loved an acupuncture treatment or reflexology. I love working with energy in my own sort of health. And so it got me curious anyway. So I started watching YouTube videos because there's lots of information on YouTube and you can kind of tap along. And I got tapping on this one video and I just had this real emotional release. This stuff came out that I didn't even know I was holding. I'd lots of tears. I had this real physical sensation around my heart, and I was, that really made me think, wow, there's something in this, there's something really powerful. And as I started kind of tapping more and reading more about it, I saw the potential in my coaching practice, because I know coaching is really powerful and it creates that clarity, and it's all about looking forward. But I found with some of my clients, there was stuff in the past that was really holding them back. And I wanted to be able to have a tool that we could clear that stuff quite quickly, safely, and just, bring that clarity to another dimension, if that makes sense. It's just a whole different way of getting to the same result. And I've had clients say to me who, have had experience with different therapies and they've had coaches, and, they said that they were really surprised at how quickly they got to the realizations and the insights they had through tapping that they didn't think they would have if they'd have just spoken around it. So it can be a really quick way of shifting those blocks that are probably from the past, that are no longer relevant, these stories that we make up and they don't serve us anymore. It's a great way to just shift those so you can crack on.
Fascinating. And is this something that, do people come for it specifically, or are they quite open to that technique when you're working with them? Because I can imagine, if I'm sitting talking to some of the delegates I work with, the leaders I work with, and they look at me oddly when I get them to stand in odd places of the room and sort of tap into how do you feel about it, and you can see this face going, it's Annabelle doing weird stuff again. Randomly they go with it, so I'm not knocking it. But do you find there's quite an easy acceptance of that?
Sometimes, and sometimes there is resistance, and sometimes it takes a bit of time to sort of warm up to that point, especially in organisations where people aren't always as used to that way of working. And I think NLP can be a bit like that sometimes. When you talk about timelines and states and getting up, using the space, I absolutely love that kind of thing. But for some people, they're, especially if they're used to being quite sedentary, it's not the norm. I remember years ago having a load of training with actors in industry, and their style was very much role play, and you could see people were like really uncomfortable with it, but I'm always up for it.
I know the world hates role play without a passion. I find it's really interesting when you're running development workshops and you sort of avoid role play because everyone goes, people don't like role play, I hate role play. And then you get the feedback sheets and they say it's the best thing that they've done in the whole course, which is random.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, when I've been in organisations where, I've done a tapping demonstration on a wellbeing day, or I've worked with a client who's, having difficulties, most people are up for it. And what I found is that it really helps to reduce their stress, some of that background stuff that may not be really what's going on in their workplace, but they've got an argument with their neighbour over parking, or there's something going on in their family that's causing them a lot of stress. It's distracting them. I've had a few examples where we've done some tapping and we've cleared that out the way, and then they've gone off for the afternoon and they feel really focused. They can just get on with what they want to do. And when you've got a stress from the outside world coming in, and then you've got the stress of not performing, that adds to the stress, and then it can kind of compound. So just being able to have those simple tools that you could go off and do it in the bathroom. No one has to know. You could sit in the cubicle, do a few rounds of tapping, and you can also just use your fingers, so nobody has to know. So I always teach a few subtle ones that people can access, so it doesn't look as obvious. But if that isn't accessible, or it just feels a bit of a stretch, simply just using your breath is such a wonderful way to change your state, get back into that relaxed state of being. And I think that is one of the main things with tapping, is that it helps to calm down that stress response, and that is always so useful to be able to know.
Absolutely. The last episode that I've just done on was really around about reflection, when we take that time out. And it's been interesting with what's obviously been going on over the last few months, where for a lot of people, it's the first time in a long time they've actually had that sort of pause, to be able to go, what's going on for me? And is this what I really want? And I think that busyness, we're all very good at the doing bit. As you said, I'm a bit of both. And I definitely recognize that I can churn through a lot of stuff at the time. But actually, if there isn't that sort of pre-planned time in where you can press pause, whether it's going to the gym, taking some time out, or whatever it may be, then you don't get that time to sort of really think and reflect and take that time. And coming back to the breath is so often the thing. I've lost count of the type of times I've sat with people in sessions and just gone, breathe. Because you can hear everything's tumbling out at such a high speed, and you just want them to calm down and then speak a little bit more calmly.
Yeah, and that's how tapping can be really helpful. It can be a great one to start off the session and say, right, tell me everything, and then let's leave that there. Now let's do what we're here to do. But it's quite funny because I was listening to the podcast, and I went for a walk, and there was a dog. So there was a field and then a bit of a path, and there was a dog sat there, and the owner was kind of tugging on, like, come on, let's go. And I was walking up, sort of like a T, and the dog was like, no, I'm just going to sit here because I want to say hello to this person. And it really struck me that this dog was just being. It was just being in the moment. It was looking at this beautiful view, and it was absolutely gorgeous in the middle of a field. And then the owner was like, no, we are going for a walk, and this is where we're going. We're on our way. And the dog was like, let's just be. I just thought it was, that's how we are, isn't it? We've got this thing to do. And how often do we allow ourselves to just be in the moment, appreciate the view, or take a breath, or say, right, what do I need right now? It's a really interesting way to start thinking about how you're being in the day and what that gives you.
That's such a funny image that you brought up of the dog, and I'm looking at the two who are sat on the floor next to me currently thinking, yes, that would be my morning when I'm up against a timeline and the Labrador is sniffing, going, but no, this is my walk. I'm just going to take time out. So when you're working with professionals, with business owners, how do you find that understanding of both what's going on for them cognitively, how they're processing things, but also what's going on with them from an energy point of view is useful to be able to help them to move forward?
I think we carry a lot of stuff with us, don't we? And often we're so used to being in thinking mode. I saw what's that TED talk when he talks about creativity, and he says that academics just think that their bodies are vehicles to carry their brain around to meetings. And I thought that was so funny, because we're so used to just thinking all the time. And what tapping can do is really help you to get out of that kind of logical part of you that says, well, logically this is what's possible, and logically this is what I should do based on the information that I've got right now. But when you can take a step back from that and almost just put yourself in a space of limitless possibility, it's a much more creative space, and tapping can really help you to get into that healing state. Because if you're stressed, or if you're you've got a stress response, fight, flight or freeze running all the time, physically it's impossible for you to start doing that dreaming and being creative, because fundamentally what you're trying to do is survive. You're trying to get through, and whether that looks like just get through the day, just get through the task list, just do all the things that you've promised that you would do because you can't say no. And all of that stuff that everyday life just sort of puts on you, and all the ways of being that have accumulated in that because of the things that you've been told, like ways of behaving and your conditioning. When you can step away from that and say, if I could rewrite the rules for my life, or if I could design my ideal lifestyle, or if I could pick any career that really lights my fire and do the things that make me feel passionate and joyful, that's where life can get exciting and interesting. And we don't always allow ourselves the space, or don't know how to access the space to be able to do that. But you first got to process the stress and put that somewhere to be able to then get into that creative state, because it is definitely how your mind is functioning in those different ways of being.
So there's that a piece in some ways of parking and moving away from what's going on from that point of view, but moving towards actually what we want to have or haven't thought about having. Because sometimes doing that limitless possibility, and I'm really fond of the Benjamin Zander quote about, when we live in the measurement world, we're always running by goals, and I'm paraphrasing. But actually in the world of possibility, ideas become limitless. And actually that's such a sometimes overwhelming concept. So when you're getting people to think around that, and actually then move from, so this is the possibility, this is the vision, how do I now need to get that to be a more concrete reality? What does that look like?
Well, that's when the resistance comes, doesn't it? That's when I can't because, or yes, but that's not going to happen because, and all different manner of things, like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not confident enough, those kind of things, or I don't have the resources, or, it's just physically impossible. So that's where tapping can come in, because it kind of removes those programmed responses of why I can't, and it allows you to think in different ways. And coaching can do that, but I feel having worked with EFT, it just brings a different element to it. It just brings a different perspective.
Yeah, and I was laughing when you said that's when we get all of the resistance, because it's there's the trans-theoretical model of change, Prochaska and De Clementi's model, which is great because you've got this stage called pre-contemplation. Oh, I'm just going to think about doing it. I'm not really sure whether I want to. And the amount of people who get stuck in pre-contemplation, which is when we write the action plan down and go, well, we've done the action plan. Look, it's pretty here. And that always makes me laugh, because I want to see mine with tea stains and coffee stains where people have actually had it out and done something and ripped it up and gone, well, that was rubbish. It didn't work. We're going to change it. Because that means there's action taking forward. And often the biggest thing that is holding people back is that fear. Not necessarily fear of, as you said, I can't do it, or I won't do it, or I don't have this resource, or I might looked after, whatever it may be. But it's that fear of, well, if it all changes, then what? People aren't always open to that. So how do you get them in that readiness state to be able to say, actually, yeah, this is okay?
So, yeah, and it's who am I becoming, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who do I have to?
Big word.
Yeah. Who do I have to be in order for that to be a reality? Not just what action steps do I have to do, but what kind of person am I going to turn into? And is that acceptable for my current social circle, or the family dynamics that I have, or the type of organization I work in? And, those are some of those things where it comes back down to that survival. Do I still belong? Am I still going to be safe if I take those steps. So it's about finding ways forward that it's kind of choose your hard, isn't it? It's hard to either stay in a box that you don't fit in anymore, and it's hard to venture out alone. But the beautiful thing is that there are other people like you on the other side of this bridge that you want to cross to this amazing place you want to be. And you start finding there are, new social circles, and, your family are okay, and, those kinds of things that make it feel more possible. But you can't always know that from a standing start. You have to start walking through, and it's really about breaking down that journey into those baby steps. I was on a coaching call yesterday, and this lady was saying, I don't have this big vision. All of these really big things, I kind of don't really want anyway, but I feel like I should be saying them because that's the big vision. So I said, well, what about the little things? What are the little things that you can check off along the way? And then it became so much more possible in her eyes, because it's not always these giant leaps of, when I get there, that's going to feel so different from where I am now. Well, what's the first step? What's the mid step? What's the baby step? And then it becomes like, oh, I've got momentum now, because that's doable. I'm okay to have it at that level. But then as you carry on through time and you keep going in that direction, those things that did feel big, they just become the obvious next step. So it's less jarring when you can break it down, and tapping can really help with that as well, because it takes this, this big abstract thing, and just, as you're going through, it really helps to break it down and make it feel much more simple.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say about that big picture, because I think often we pose those questions, whether it be, in our role as coaches or as a line manager in a workplace, and we say, where do you want to be in 5 years' time, or what's your big career goal? And it's just too big. I mean, one of the best questions is, so what development do you need? And that's just like blowing people's minds, because they just can't get it. But if you go, what's great, what do you love, and what's rubbish now, and what's the bit in the middle that's missing, they're simple questions. People can answer that. And I love exactly, I totally agree about the micro goals, because when it is that big overwhelming thing and we can't break it down, we beat ourselves up when we don't do the big things, because we've never made a start on it because it's got to be perfect, where actually, as if it's tiny, that marginal gains factor really, really kicks in as we move forward with bits. So I'm sure I was reading something on your website where actually being in that readiness state allows us to be open to what's coming. And this piece around law of attraction, and how we actually open ourselves to that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So I absolutely love law of attraction. If you've read what is it, Psycho-Cybernetics, that's quite a law of attraction kind of book, but it's I'd say for scientists. That's law of attraction for scientists. And it's talking about your reticular activating system, and what you focus on is what comes to you. And so law of attraction, I think, can look a bit sort of spiritual, and it can be, but you can be non-spiritual and don't have to have a faith for it to be able to work for you. So it depends where you're coming from, and you don't have to just write it off if you're not spiritual. So I want to kind of say that, because it's not for people, think it might not be for everyone, but really it's about saying, what is it that you want to manifest, or what goal do you want to work towards, and how will you feel when you get there? So it's really into the state of it. You can get into that real NLP way, real look, feel, sound, use all your senses. What's going to be true for you when that happens? And then you're activating your brain to be able to look for opportunities, or you're opening up, you've got less resistance for that to come into your life. So for example, it happened to me today. I sold some tickets, and we want to put some lawn down in our garden. So I said, right, oh Savvy, I've sold the tickets, that should be enough for the turf. And he said, no, it's a little bit more than that. So I said, oh, well, I'll need to make this much then. And then as we've been on this call, another ticket was sold, and that's how much we've made, so we can turf the garden. So I could call that law of attraction, and I kind of believe it is, because I was just, I had no resistance to that, and I was totally open for us to visualize the turf on the lawn. And so you can make it as creative or as spiritual and storytelling as you like, or it could just be very logical, and I've written this goal down. We all know if you write your goals down, it's more likely to happen. Similar thing at play. I've written it down. This is, and I've logically worked out how many tickets I need to sell, and then I've worked out how much action I need to take. And you can do it either way, but I really like doing it in the sensory way, because it feels magical, it feels abundant, and it's exciting.
I love that. I love that piece around, and it's so practical, as you said, around what's happened today. And you've just added to my Amazon reading list cybernetics, and I'm there, just out of a bit of interest. But I think it strikes me, just listening to you talk about law of attraction, the way that you talked about it. It reminded me that an awful lot of people say, "Oh, well, it was just luck that I got it," which in some ways is a similar type of thing, because it's like, well, yes, okay, luck does exist, but it's actually very rare, because invariably it's about preparedness and opportunity coming together. And that manifestation, that thinking about how I need to be, what I need to do, is that really that stage of preparedness, of understanding what is it that I need to have in place. Because when opportunities come, if we haven't got the right skill, if we're not prepared, if we're not in the right mindset, we don't want to do it, we're not going to take the opportunity up. So the luck isn't going to happen in the first place. So you could rename it if that sits better for you. If you're sitting listening to this going, not sure about that, because actually they're very, very similar. And I think you're absolutely right. It's also about being open to that opportunity that comes up, irrespective of whether it was what you planned it to be, and just seeing where it goes. And that can be quite scary for people, to be quite that free in their thought process, or flexible in their thought process.
Yeah, and it is that harmony of being and doing. You do the work, you set it up. Nobody would have found that link if I hadn't sent it out. But I was open to whoever wanted to buy the ticket. But people say it's not just about sitting and wishing for checks. Now, I have manifested random checks in the post, just as a sort of little game. So you can have fun with it as well. But for those people who that's a bit of a step too far, it is about that co-creation. You have to show up for that luck, if you want to call it, to come in. But yeah, you have to do the work.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. When people go, I didn't get the promotion, I didn't get the role I wanted. It's like, well, you sort of have to be acting in the behavior of how you need to be in the role, not how you are now, for people to even think you're capable of it. So it is that showing up in the right way and working out what's not in alignment. If I look at where I want to be and where I am now, what's not congruent, what needs to be different? Because people don't get triggered, that attraction trigger for them to go, actually, yes, it's that person I need, or it's that piece I want, isn't going to be there if the conditions aren't right. So if we've got people listening now who are thinking about, how can I take advantage of some of this, or find out more about this, or start, bringing this energy work or embodiment work into, my life to be able to make that more effective, what would you suggest to them?
Get curious. Follow the threads, follow the curiosity, take some of these keywords and, go and do some research. I've written quite a few LinkedIn articles. There's a resource on my website that takes you through a tapping demonstration, and, have a go. My biggest advice is, from a bookworm, it's not just about reading the books. It's about implementing, taking action, feeling okay to get it wrong, making mistakes, imperfect action, and having a go and getting used to doing your own exploration. And I think this comes again to this being. We're constantly bombarded with advice and other people's expectations and how they think you should do it and what pathway they recommend you take and their success blueprint that's, you know, the fast track to this, and, you know, really focused on outcomes. But, you know, follow your curiosity and see where that leads is my advice.
Fabulous. And if people were looking for a resource to find out more about EFT, where would they go for that?
So if you go to clearwatercoach.co.uk, there's a free stuff tab, and then I've got a video where there's a demonstration, and there's a one pager that you can print out as well. So it's really simple, but definitely tap along. Don't just watch the video, tap along.
Excellent. I shall go and check it out afterwards. And for those of you listening, we'll pop that in the show notes page. So if you want to capture that, if you haven't had time to write it down, if you've been out and about, then you can pick it up there. So Sarah, I want to say thank you for joining us today and for sharing all of the insight that you've shared. This has been The Being Leader. I'm Annabelle Graham of Successful Training, and I've been in dialogue with Sarah Sienkiewicz of Clearwater Coach. And we'll hope to see you on future episodes. Thanks for listening to The Being Leader.